We're talking about bound. What does it mean to be bound? Tied down, held back, restricted. We said last time that there's a psychological term that represents this concept of being bound, and it's called a constraint. And a constraint is anything that keeps you from being the best you can be. And so my friend Dr. Flip Flippin from College Station, Texas, said there are three basic groups of constraints. Number one, what he calls inconsequential constraints. Being short, being tall. He says, but most of these have a minimal impact on our lives. The second area of constraint is hireable constraints. And this means you can hire somebody to help you with these constraints and meet the needs that are there. Like you can get a good housekeeper. You can get somebody to take care of your lawn. You can find a professional organizer if you need to get organized. The third area is owned constraints. And he says this group of constraints will impact your life personally, professionally, and will impact you profoundly. This is things like having low self-confidence, having a low self-control in your life, having a low level of trustworthiness in your life. Listen to this. This is critical. If you think this is just psychological mumbo jumbo, all of us have constraints. Everyone that listens to this, you have constraints. I have constraints. But listen to this. You can't rise above your constraints that you don't or won't deal with. You will always remain bound by those constraints. And so in Africa, the story's told of how they catch monkeys. So what they do is they'll take a coconut, they'll put a little hole in it, then they'll put a piece of apple or banana inside the coconut. Then they'll strap it down like to a tree or a branch or something. So the little monkey comes along and says, man, that's a weird looking coconut. Sees a little hole and squunches that little hand up and sticks it in there. And then he grabs the goodie. Now he's got a problem. He's got to make a decision. He's either going to let go of the goodie and come out, or he's going to remain in there because he's gripping and grasping the goodie, his hand is too large to get out of the little hole. And so then the hunter comes along, takes his little club, bonks him in the head, puts him on a barbecue pit. That's how it's done. You say, so what's the point of that? Listen to this. Many of us are held captive by the constraints we continue to clutch, like that monkey, tenaciously, including unresolved issues from our past, because we can't or won't address them. Listen, friends, the wisest thing any of us can do is to deal with our constraints. So here's my game plan for you. Number one, you got to be willing to name your constraints. Number two, you got to be willing to deal with them. Number three, you got to come up with a game plan to deal with them. You can do that, and it'll set you free. If you don't deal with your constraints, you'll always remain held down, held back, and paralyzed, and you won't be able to become all the person God wants you to be. So get that game plan. You think about that.